Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Proof of Vision. We had on Adam, the co-founder of Dolomite today. Great discussion. If you're a Dolomite fan like me, like I've been a Dolomite fanboy for forever, um, definitely check out this episode. We go deep into Dolomite's origins and kind of like their slow progression to this huge phase of growth that I think that they've seen, obviously with their launch on Berachain, and it really just kind of highlights like how feature rich rather that Dolomite is. They really think about the user and the user experience, whether you're lending, whether you're borrowing. How can they help you tap into some of the things happening on Berachain with proof of liquidity without having to worry about all the complexity. So it was just a really great conversation. Check it out. Obviously, like and subscribe if you find it useful, and we'll see you on the next episode of Proof of Vision. Thank you. All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of Proof of Vision. Really excited today to be talking with Dolomite. We've got Adam, the co-founder, on with us. How are we doing, sir?
Doing well, doing well. Keeping very busy, but certainly a good thing, and always plenty to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been awesome to see Dolomite's I would call it slow but steady growth, and well, I would call it slow but steady, and then you guys kind of had that like hockey stick, like moment, right? Which was kind of like the Berachain integration, which we'll get into, but obviously, I've been following Dolomite for a long time, personally, from when you guys launched on Arbitrum, and kind of it's been awesome to see. I think Dolomite kind of like staying true to its roots, kind of, which we'll talk about a little bit more as we get into this, a little bit. But just been awesome to see. Like if I think about like teams in the space that like I'm rooting for, just because I think they're generally like great people, and also great product. Like Dolomite always comes up. So
Definitely
excited
appreciate
to.
that. We try and live up to that, and a lot of the growth is like what you point out as a result. It's a steady process, but as long as you're building something of value, the idea is that it keeps adding up rather than something where it's flash in the pan. If it's built on hype.
Yep. Absolutely. So, I guess all that being said, let's get into it. So, first and foremost, want to introduce you to the listeners. Maybe give us a little bit about your background. How'd you get into crypto? Maybe what were you doing prior? And then kind of what led to the evolution, I guess, of building Dolomite.
Sure. So, hey everyone, I'm Adam. I'm a co-founder of Dolomite with my co-founder Corey. My background, I guess my origin with crypto is 2013. Bitcoin hits $1,000 for the first time, and I'm active on this programming forum. And someone starts to build out something that you couldn't even call it an altcoin by today's standards, but playing around with the tech a little bit, and I was able to jump in and improve the miner a little, and I mined some of it on my crappy old laptop, and I even sold some of it, and the whole process of it kind of blew my mind, and led me to read a little deeper into it. Was in and out of the space for a little while from there. My co-founder got in 2015. He was creating game exploitation software, and PayPal shut him down and had to accept Bitcoin. But 2017 is really where just things kicked off for us, where my co-founder and I were same dorm, same floor in college, same major. We're doing computer science and business joint degree program, and we hit it off pretty early on, and we're doing hackathons and side projects and coding competitions, and we love to do all those sort of things, and just love to really build. And 2017 rolled around, crypto space started heating up. Anyone was a good trader at that point, but we were waking up in the middle of the night to check prices, trading all the time using different exchanges, and we just really didn't like the experience of using centralized exchanges. It was at the time they had grown far faster than their security or ethics, warranted. So there were a lot of hacks, there was a lot of fraud, and just overall using them wasn't great. And so we started to explore alternatives, which we looked at decentralized exchanges, which at the time was really just Ether Delta. Terrible user interface, so easy to fat finger a trade, just the sketchiest assets that couldn't even be listed on the sketchiest exchanges. But the tech was cool. It was really cool, and the idea that we had was that if we could build out a better UI for it and a bit better tech, this could really be the direction that things are heading. So just considering we love to build things, we just started building. Beginning of 2018, we were building a DEX on Loopring protocol back then. And we're building out the first DEX on their protocol. It's probably one of the first DEXs in general, but hard to tell when people really started building out what became DeFi. And received an investment from them, and then just have been doing it ever since. Of course, Dolomite evolved significantly. The space evolved significantly. Back then it wasn't DeFi at all. It was open finance, if anything. And it was maybe $5 million of trade volume on a good day across the entire DEX ecosystem. We had to explain to people what MetaMask was, or why you'd even want to use a DEX when there's such low liquidity. But we thought the tech was really cool, and we thought it really could be something. And we'd pitch it to investors of, in 3 years it'll do $100 million of daily trade volume, and maybe we were 50% BSing a little bit, but little did we know it went well beyond that. Uniswap alone crossed $1 billion. And so, it's kind of what we've been doing ever since. So, I figure that'll transition smoothly into what we'll talk about next. But there was no really before crypto for me, at least professionally. We got funded right before graduating college. And at this point, coming up on a decade doing it full time, it was soon at least. Certainly been a journey.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that. Like, it's very rare that I talk to somebody where they're like, "Yeah, I didn't really do anything else before crypto, man. Like, this is it, right?" Like,
well, everyone's
this was
like
the
a
thing.
refugee from somewhere else. People didn't really go to college for it or anything like that. A lot of people didn't plan it to be part of their career. It's something they stumbled upon, or it intrigued them, and it means everyone in the space is someone who actively transitioned to it, kind of took a leap of faith, and I think it creates for an interesting environment.
Yeah, no, it does for sure. It does for sure. So, okay, so that kind of leads us up to kind of Dolomite, right? Describe Dolomite to users, I guess, that may be getting exposed to it for the first time. Like, how would you describe Dolomite?
Yeah, well, even just starting to properly transition from where I was before. I was talking a lot about building out a better DEX or a better exchange, really, in general, and that's what our original version of Dolomite was: off-chain order matching, on-chain settlement. We got a little bit of product market fit there. We were doing pretty well, but it's just DeFi was heading in a different direction, and we ended up spinning it down to build out our modern version that we launched in 2022. And what it is, it's a money market, a lending protocol, a place to lend and earn interest or to borrow. And that's it in its simplest form, but that exists. There are other ones that do that. So what is Dolomite doing differently? It really comes down to a few things, but the key ones are that we support a far broader set of assets with way more depth and just overall a higher number. When something like Aave or Compound was launching, there were maybe a dozen assets that anyone would want to borrow or lend. It just wasn't that fleshed out of an ecosystem. It didn't need to support a lot, and the assets didn't really do much. But modern DeFi is thousands of assets. A single project, Pendle on one network can have 50 plus assets, and a lot of them do things. They invest, stake, get rewards. You could use them for voting, a million other things, and often with other lending protocols, you're giving up all of that ability when you try and use it as collateral, or often they just don't support it. A lot of them at their core level can only support a few dozen assets, so they get very selective with which ones they bring on. But we don't have those limitations. We built Dolomite to be incredibly flexible and versatile, and it means that we bring on a lot of interesting assets that are not supported elsewhere, ones that have great yield, great rewards. And the biggest thing that people use Dolomite for is to borrow and then loop into more of that. So if you're earning 15%, you could borrow for 5%. If you could loop that, you could amplify that yield. Same thing for points or rewards or any other kind of benefit like that. And that's really a lot of the strength of it. And then the secondary is that all that borrowing means that there's great rates for lenders of those assets that are being borrowed. So that's really the whole of the Dolomite ecosystem in brief. But we built in so many other core features that are just things that we wanted to use, things that really power up your experience.
Yeah, no, it's thanks for that. And when people ask me about Dolomite, like, the way I describe it, it's the next generation of like lending markets or money markets is the way
We'd
I
love to
like to
believe so.
describe it.
Yeah.
Because, well, if you think about it, like, you brought up Aave and Compound, and like obviously like Aave is still extremely dominant on mainnet. especially for blue chip assets. But there's a lot of features that I think Dolomite has brought to the table, right? That like just make your quality of life a lot smoother, and it allows you to kind of like maximize DeFi to like its fullest extent. Where like Aave is focused on doing what it does very well, but putting more on the, like, hey, we'll create the best lending experience for you that we possibly can on Aave. You guys go figure out the rest, right? Whereas like Dolomite's kind of taking it to the next level, trying to keep the users on the platform with your kind of some of your strategies, right? For example, that you guys have rolled out, or again, being able to like roll your assets into other positions very seamlessly. But going back to what you said about kind of at the core, maybe versus Aave or some of these other like pooled approach where like all these assets are pooled against each other, like what is it that makes Dolomite able to flexibly like onboard thousands of assets that have different risk profiles, etc. Like what is it under the hood that makes it so flexible to be able to enable that?
Yeah, under the hood, it really comes down to our virtual liquidity model. We're not generally doing receipt tokens like you might find another one that can introduce rigidity. We have, because of the flexibility of Dolomite, we have added them for some use cases, but generally you're depositing first to Dolomite and then it is in your Dolomite balance. And that's like if you were to deposit to centralized exchange funding account or something like that, and you're earning interest on that, but it's not being used for any of the other activities, any borrowing that you're going to be doing. It is just now on Dolomite. But once it's on Dolomite, that's where you get to use all the features of Dolomite, and it's that extra step in this virtual liquidity that we deal with that makes it far more flexible. And it means that we could take on these assets and they could sit there and do all the awesome things that the asset does while your virtual liquidity is being used in different strategies and different positions. And it's something where Aave has that strength of really having existed longer. That's a lot of big strength in DeFi in general. The only proof of safety or security is time, really. And you can get as many audits as you want. They've established this base, but it also means they end up moving a little slower on updates and features and things they put out. They really just focus on that core that they currently have. And that's where we think we could come in to overtake things just by bringing in a lot more. And we try and really take that safety first approach, and we've operated for 2.5 years at this point without issue, and with a couple dollars of bad debt that are only not settled because it would cost more in gas to settle them. But yeah, that's really been the core of it. And these features, it's like the ones you mentioned for strategies or borrow positions, and I don't know, I could go into those, but I don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, no, for sure. I guess sticking on the virtual liquidity topic for a second. So give us a working example. Like I know there's a lot. I know the ESGMX example from way back. Was a example of this, or the stake GMX, right? But like obviously Berachain's kind of become like I think Dolomite's second home. He started on Arbitrum, but Dolomite's kind of become like the base of operations, I would say, from my opinion. So what's an example of like an exotic asset on Berachain that really like amplifies the utility of proof of virtual liquidity? Like, give me
Yeah,
a
we have.
working example.
Yeah, I'd say we have a few of them, some out and some coming very, very soon. One that we have out right now is what you could do with Bera on Dolomite. You could deposit it and you'll earn lending yield, often very good yield, just because there's a lot of opportunities on Berachain. But then you could take that Bera and go to Infrared and stake it, and then you're earning BGT on top of the lending yield. So you continue to earn this lending yield. It's still there being lent out, but also being able to use for staking. And that's just part of that flexibility. But then it's going to be amplified further with our proof of liquidity integrations that are coming very soon. We're going to be starting with proof of liquidity RUSD, and it means that you could stake in proof of liquidity while borrowing against it and allow you to loop. You could borrow correlated assets. You're really not taking on extra price exposure, but you're amplifying the amount that you have in proof of liquidity. And often it's very much a choice. You could take assets and put them in proof of liquidity and they sit there and they don't do much, but sure, they earn some great rewards. I think right now it might even be like 200% plus APY or something like that, which is great. But we're really trying to remove those roadblocks, unfreeze the liquidity from these sort of dead ends. And so yeah, instead you could take it and it's still a viable asset. There's nothing that makes it not compatible with being used as collateral, as long as it could be liquid enough, it could be liquidated. why not? So you could borrow a stable coin against it, and it's pegged to stables, and loop into it to amplify that. And thanks to our E-mode feature that we launched recently, you could push that up to, I think, 8x is what we'll support. So you could really push those rewards up. And likewise, that also just helps the broader reservoir ecosystem. So you could do an SR USD strategy where their RUSD is paired up with SRUSD, where SRUSD is really earning the yield from how they allocate assets behind the scenes. But you could loop into that, and it's this time you don't deal with BGT rewards. You don't have to play in the Berachain ecosystem if you don't want, but you could really maximize stablecoin yield. And it's those sort of strategies that just you can't find elsewhere. And it's those are the ones that we really love to dive into and build out.
This episode is brought to you by Pendle. Pendle is a leading protocol in the DeFi yield sector, operating as a permissionless yield trading protocol, facilitating the tokenization and splitting of any yield-bearing assets in DeFi. This allows users to speculate on future yield or earn a fixed rate on their assets. Learn more at pendle.finance. Yep. And again, too, I guess this virtual liquidity kind of creates this base layer where you can build things like these strategies on top of, right? So let's talk about the strategies product itself for a second. You just touched on one, obviously, that is live right now or is coming. But what was the motivation behind creating strategies on Dolomite and kind of launching that product within the Dolomite ecosystem? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So really, we almost have to roll it back one step, because what Dolomite offers is, with our borrowing, if you're familiar with something like Aave, a lot of that is whatever you deposit is your collateral, and whatever you borrow is borrowed against that. If you're liquidated, it's putting all that at risk. And if you really want to isolate things, you got to start using multiple wallets. But Dolomite, you put it on Dolomite, you're earning lending yield. But then if you want to borrow, you open up a borrow position. It's its own little isolated loan where you choose what collateral you want and how much, and same thing for your debt. And you could have one that's a very high risk leverage position, one that's a nice delta neutral, kind of more stable yield, one where you're just freeing up capital. And if that high risk position gets liquidated, it only affects the assets that you chose to involve in that one position. It doesn't affect the others, doesn't affect your Dolomite balance. And that's just one of the things that it's at this point we launched it quite a while ago as a feature, but it's still one that I love, and people really make a lot of use of, and it almost feels obvious, and I go somewhere else and it feels restricting to not have it. But strategies are just the next natural evolution of that. With these borrow positions, there were a lot of great users, really intelligent people making these fantastic positions, taking advantage of unique strategies, maximizing yield or points or rewards or anything like that. And that's fantastic if you have that kind of knowledge. But strategies just takes it that step further, where we look at a lot of the strategies that are available that people are engaging with, and we package them up for you and make it all something that you could do in one click, so you don't have to worry about figuring out which assets and how much. We do it where you could just scroll through them all on the page, because discoverability is another one. If we can forget, people who are so deep into the space, I imagine you as well, where you're familiar with all the options out there, but someone who's just a more average or casual user, you're not plugged into literally everything out there. You're not familiar with all the names that are on the screen there, and it can be overwhelming. How do you choose between them? But we give you a nice little list. You could find strategies that you may not have thought about or known about. You could filter it down, and for each one, you have all the information presented to you. You have 30 days historical yield and how it's changed over time, what the average is. You got the risks. You got why the strategy works. Whether the asset's involved. Basically every piece of info you need to make an educated decision on which strategy you'd like to engage with. And then it's just one click, and it behind the scenes is essentially just opening up a borrow position, something you could do manually if you wanted, but it simplifies it and accelerates it for you. And same thing for closing it. But then we give you the flexibility where if you have one of these strategies open and you think you just want to tweak it a little, you want to go a little beyond the default, you can just head over to the borrow page and manage it like a borrow position. You could get a little custom if you wanted. You could, adjust things with a more fine-tooth comb. But it's, it was really about simplifying it and trying to bring it to a broader audience. And, even then it's out of reach for a lot of people. Look at even the more simpler products, but every step that we could take towards making it more accessible and easy to use, I think, is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. And you bring up a good point too. Like even people that are like living and breathing in this space, like, like myself and you and anybody else, like, I'll be scrolling the timeline and I'll see like, oh man, that strategy looks really good. Like, look, that's a good layout, right? I'll bookmark it and then I'll forget about it, and then I'll, later I'll be like, man, where was that strategy at, right? So now I got to scroll back through and try to find it, or
Oh, it's like, oh man, I could have
search
taken
for it.
advantage of that. That looks like it was getting a lot of
Right.
yield. I forgot about it from a couple months ago or something
No,
like that.
exactly. And so like these kinds of things, like I talk about it a lot on this podcast, but like these kinds of things, these simple like UX upgrades, combined over time, are really what's going to help us get to that next level, of onboarding, new users and onboarding people that really like it's going to be a huge leg up for them to ever get on like our level of understanding of these products, probably. But little things like that actually go a long, long way. My question on the strategies. So right now, all of the strategies are curated by the Dolomite team. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. And are you guys taking a performance fee? Like how does the fee
No,
structure look?
don't take anything out of it. It's exactly as if you were to build it yourself on the borrow page. We don't want to put any extra roadblocks there for now. It's something where we could leave it to the DAO now that we have a token out, and if we'd like to go in a different direction with it, but we want to start at a make it as easy and streamlined as possible. Really.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities with it too. Like one thing that would be really interesting is like if you guys have kind of you've got the modular kind of like pieces, on Dolomite to create these strategies, but almost allowing like other people to come in and create their own,
Yeah,
within
it's something
Dolomite.
we've talked about, which would be so cool, and maybe let them take a little performance free fee from it if they have a popular strategy, and you have a whole marketplace of them. It's something that the tech can support it up to a certain level, but there's certainly that other aspect to it now, where if you're bringing that social and cross user interaction, that Dolomite is still very much built around your one person engaging with the markets, but it's one we've talked about, and I think it would be really awesome to have. But that's the thing with a lot of what we're building, is it feels like the potential feature list it just keeps getting longer. We have a lot that we'd like to keep throwing on the roadmap, and
Yeah,
it's just one thing at a time, really.
yeah, it's a good problem to have, right? One thing I wanted to ask you before we get into Berachain, because I want to talk about Berachain a little bit. I've always been curious. Like, I think everybody is a lending protocol that's coming to market, no matter what, whether you want to say it or not. You've got to compete with Aave. You've got to figure out how you're going to try to take market share from Aave. There's different ways to do that. Obviously, you could directly compete with them. You could indirectly compete with them. You could try to compete in places they're not competing in. So many different ways to go about that, right? But why hasn't Dolomite ever deployed on mainnet? I was wondering that today. Like, I know you're on Arbitrum, I know you're on Berachain, and I think maybe one or two other L2s, Mantle, I think.
Yep,
But
mental X layer, yeah.
yeah, but why haven't you guys deployed on mainnet?
It comes down more to our architecture than strategy. A lot of protocols are really designed, really trying to cut gas costs in every corner to make transactions as cheap as possible, which, in the past was more important. As costs have come down, it becomes less so. But, it's still pretty key on mainnet. Dolomite is really built the other way. It's more of how much can we fit into each transaction, and that's something that gets a little expensive on mainnet. And we don't want to make the platform something that's whales only. It's a lot harder to bring people in, but it's something that works very well with L2s, where the costs are still very cheap. It could still be just 5 cents, 10 cents, even though there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And so that's really how we approach this, at least just taking into account our technology. But of course, strategy wise, you do have to have some angle coming into it if you're ever going to go head to head with Aave. And it's something where we try to do it both in our approach and our assets. We bring on the things that you just can't find on Aave, and we try and go on chains where Aave isn't, and really just establish ourselves and grow. And it's something where you reach a certain size and you could start attracting those larger users and institutions that are currently on Aave because of its track record and its size. But you cross certain thresholds of time without issue, and of size, and if the yield is appealing enough, you could really bring some people over, even if they're not engaging with all the unique and interesting assets. But we still need lenders of a lot of those core assets to really enable a lot of these strategies. But that's part of why we launched on Berachain, was to be there day one, establish ourselves as their primary lending protocol is what we're looking at for Botanics. And it was something where we were climbing the ranks with on Arbitrum, but it's definitely hard to crack into the amount that Aave has on there. But even pre-token and all that, we still got pretty high up in terms of Arbitrum protocol size. But it's a challenge to take on any of the bigger guys. But that's why you can't just have a slightly better version of what they do. You have to do something that you can't do on Aave, or just Aave just isn't available.
Yep. No, no, makes perfect sense. And then it becomes like a question to me of like, so part of the strategy is, like you said, getting in day one, kind of establishing yourself as that liquidity hub, for borrowing and lending on a given chain. So then it kind of comes down to like, how good is Dolomite at assessing because there's a new L1 every day. There was 4 on Friday. I saw 4 funding announcements. Like, holy shit, how many more of these can we have? But anyway, it comes down to like how can Dolomite really assess a chain and know that chain's going to have users and it's worth deploying our resources to that chain? Speak to that a little bit. Like how do you think about that? Because that's very difficult to do, right?
It's definitely, there's a lot to consider with it. And, like you say, there's ones popping up all the time. And as long as they're still becoming huge and raising a lot of money, they're going to keep coming along. But it's something where we don't really go for a broader shotgun approach. It's about trying to move tactically and carefully. It's, of course, to some degree, you have to predict how well it'll do, but there's things that could help us feel confident in the direction that we're going. One we look at is, are we reaching new people? It's something where you get into this bubble and you're only reaching the same people and they're already aware of your features and your strategies. And at that point, you can make incremental gains as you put out new features and integrations, but you can't expand as quickly. And, we'd like to be able to bring Dolomite to as many people as possible. So something like Berachain was just to really burst out of that Arbitrum bubble and make our ecosystem even bigger. Same thing with, we're looking at Botanics will be the next one we launch on, and that one, it's about reaching a whole new type of user. I mean, this one, they're looking to go into the Bitcoin DeFi space. They want to bring DeFi to Bitcoin users and people who aren't at all in the current ecosystem. And so if we could bring Dolomite to them and show them the awesome features that come along with DeFi, that helps us reach even more. And so that's something that we're really considering. Is it a different group? Is it something that really helps us expand? But along with that, there's certainly also the timing of it. If you're launching on a chain that's already been live for a while, it's more of an uphill battle. That's why we try and establish ourselves early. But of course, you can't always do that, and that also can mean a little more of a bet on the chain. But the next thing we're looking at is the other projects that are launching there as well. Lending protocols, money markets don't really exist in isolation. We exist to help other protocols, help other assets become more useful, and help people use their assets from other protocols. So we need great teams to work with. That's something that we're looking at as well, and that's something we loved about the Berachain ecosystem. And Berachain as a team was great for helping connect us with other teams and really facilitate those kind of integrations and growth. But same thing for Botanics. We'll be working with GMX. We've been working with them forever, really, since the start of Dolomite. And I think that creates some cool opportunities. And it's ones where we're also looking at Base, for example. Obviously already been live for a little while, but it presents a whole list of great projects that we can integrate with, great assets that we could bring on and create unique opportunities with. And so that's really all that we're looking at there is this ecosystem. How can we fit into it? And, of course, there's some element of guessing how big it'll be. And that's something that you kind of just need to judge based on experience, based on their team, based on the hype behind it. There's no perfect predictor of it. But if all of it comes together to make an appealing a place to launch, it's something we'll put the time behind.
Alchemix Finance empowers you to spend and save at the same time with a self-repaying, interest-free, non-liquidatable loan. Deposit your assets and access your future yield today. Available on Mainnet, Arbitrum, and Optimism. Head to alchemix.fi to get started.
Yeah, no, it's good forward thinking. I think obviously it's difficult to predict. But for example, even like the Botanics opportunity, right? it's a big opportunity that I think not enough people are talking about, or they probably are talking about it, just not to me, or on my timeline, or whatever you want to say. But that BTC Fi opportunity is massive, and whatever chain can actually crack and like tap into convincing Bitcoin holders to like bring their assets on chain and earn yield and do crazy things with it, like is going to do it extremely well, right?
Yeah, that's
We're
the
already
big
seeing
question is
it.
can they crack into it? And,
Yeah,
we like a lot of what
yeah,
they're doing over at Botanics, and I think they have a good shot at it. Of course, nothing's guaranteed, and you need to get into the mind of the Bitcoiner. Some of them are hardcore, not going to ever engage with it, but the Bitcoin ecosystem is huge. It's a huge variety of people, and I think that if they could see awesome yield opportunities and trading opportunities that are on chain, I think that there's certainly some market there, and it's huge and untapped.
yeah, completely agree. Let's revert back to Berachain real quick, and again, talking about being in early. Um, is a huge catalyst for Dolomite, right? Like I can't remember what your TVL was before Berachain, but I think you guys have at least doubled or even tripled your TVL. You got over $1 billion, in TVL at one point. Let's talk about Berachain. A couple of things that I think went really, really well for Berachain pre-launch, right? One of them was Royco, or Boyco, however you want to talk about it. Let's talk about that opportunity for Dolomite, right? Because I know Dolomite was one of the vaults, I think, for Boyco. Talk about how all that came together and really like maybe the benefits for Dolomite and how you see this unfolding now as like those positions unwind and become unlocked.
Yeah, sure. So it's one where we really hit it off with the Berachain team early on. They have some great people on their team. Jack Melnick is someone we've worked with for a while, even before Berachain, and he really knows what he's doing and just very well connected. And so we were exploring launching on it for a little while, and certainly there's been plenty of hype going into on the test net, ahead of Royco or Boyco, but Boyco was, I think, exceeded everyone's expectations, at least to one degree or another. It was really kicked off, I'd say, mostly by the external vaults that other teams set up to almost front run, Boyco. We were certainly expecting to see quite a lot flow into Boyco. They had a lot of momentum behind them, and we were excited to be able to support it as the lending market for Berachain. But it was really when they started launching these external vaults that everyone said, okay, here, you get a bunch of extra points and deposit with us first. And once one popped up, then another, and each one had their own massive reach with marketing and massive amount of hype behind them, and it just amplified everything that was brought in. It was like nearly 3 billion, I think, or something like that. And Dolomite was a major recipient of a lot of it. A lot of these external vaults were looking where to allocate all these deposits that were going to the vault, and Dolomite had a track record. A lot of the projects on Berachain were ones that were Berachain native that only been spun up for Berachain, and Dolomite having the track record, having a good opportunity there. That you're not dealing with IL or anything like that. It's just a very straightforward opportunity, and because of our ability to support a wide range of assets, including a lot of these vaults wanted to have their own asset integrated into it as well. We did a ton of integrations ahead of the launch of Berachain. I think it was like 30 or something, and we had all those on day one, and it meant a great kickoff for Berachain. Right from the start, they were, I think, top 10 right from the beginning in terms of TVL for chains, and it was fantastic for Dolomite as well, because that just creates opportunity. High liquidity meant low borrowing costs, fantastic for looping, and it also just gave this period of just sort of time for Berachain to spin up, for Dolomite to spin up on Berachain as we continue to launch feature and after feature, and because of our confidence going into it, that's why we allocated 3% of our token supply just to go towards Berachain Boyco participants. Berachain threw their own rewards behind it as well. I think it was like 2% of Bera or something like that. And plus, everyone, even while it was locked up in Boyco, earned lending yield if it was a lendable asset on Dolomite. So it was a fantastic kickoff to the chain. I think hugely successful. I think we'll see a lot of replication of it from other launches. And yeah, I mean, we are now approaching the 90-day unlocks, because some of it was 30-day, a lot of it was 90-day, and that will certainly shake up some things. But we're confident in where we're going from here. It's going to pair well with the launch of our proof of liquidity assets coming up very soon. What we expect to see is that certainly a lot of people will transition out of some of these stables and ETH and things like that. And the question is, where are they going to go with it? Some may have just been there to farm and take it to another chain, but likewise, I think a lot of them will shift into the assets that create these yield opportunities, shift into our new proof of liquidity, RUSD, and really try and maximize their BGT rewards or their yield. Likewise, because of the opportunity that these things present, where you could go 8x leveraged loop and it's still delta neutral, that amplifies it. So even if a chunk of liquidity leaves, we'll see amplified TVL just from these loops. And likewise, a lot of these loops, they still need supply liquidity. People are going to want to borrow more than ever, which means that anyone who's still on there supplying some ETH, USDC, WBTC can see some amplified yield, and hopefully bring in some more who are really just looking to earn some good yield without engaging in strategies or anything like that. So we're looking forward to it. I think it will. I think it'll flow well, and it'll free up a lot of capital that right now is very rigidly locked, but can now really engage with the Berachain ecosystem, really engage with these new proof of liquidity mechanisms, and all the opportunities that abound. So yeah, I think it should go pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of how do you launch a chain, I think that went about as well as could be expected in terms of strategy. Like, how do you bootstrap the chain? Obviously, I think Blast tried something similar to that. It was a little bit different, obviously, and it went well for them at the beginning, not so well maybe at the end. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like how do you bootstrap a chain, I agree. I think we will see people copy that structure. So good for Royco, obviously, because I'm sure they're getting
Oh, I'm sure they're
bombarded.
very happy about it. So they're gonna have a lot of people knocking on their door, to replicate it with them.
Yeah, for sure. And then kind of rolling into my next subject or the next topic, right? Proof of liquidity has come up several times in this conversation. I'm wondering for the listeners if you can break down proof of liquidity. What is it? And how is Dolomite viewing like their proof of liquidity integration / strategy for proof of liquidity moving forward?
Sure. Well, I'll do my best. I'm always shaky at explaining it well, at least, but you could always learn it well in the docs otherwise. But essentially, with Berachain, the assets that are securing the chain on other networks is often staked, and it's not really being effectively used in the ecosystem. But Berachain takes it the step further, where you could stake assets that are being used with protocols. You're adding liquidity to the protocols, because protocols are really how any chain flourishes. You need this active ecosystem, you need liquidity. And so you could stake in proof of liquidity to earn BGT rewards, which is their governance token. It's essentially a soulbound block token, can be converted in one direction to Bera. And projects can bribe validators to try and get BGT rewards to their proof of liquidity vault, and then those users will receive BGT for staking that asset. So a lot of what Dolomite's looking to do is try and turn this into this virtuous cycle where the bribes that we're doing are not being done in some unsustainable way. We want to do it where the actual reserve factor, the interest that people are paying on loans that they're borrowing, we take that and put that into bribes for proof of liquidity. So then users who are staking can earn BGT rewards. It increases the incentive to deposit on Dolomite, to stake in proof of liquidity, to add to the liquidity on Dolomite, which creates more opportunities for that borrowing and that looping. So we're trying to create that great cycle where people can be adding to liquidity to Dolomite, to Berachain as a whole, earning BGT, participating in Berachain's governance, and gaining the rewards from participating in proof of liquidity. But being done in a way where it's all just part of the ecosystem. It's done using real yields, real fees that are being paid, and something that can be sustainably done into the future and scale up by encouraging more liquidity, encouraging more borrowing, and therefore bringing out more bribes.
Yeah, makes sense. So basically, bribing validators with revenue that Dolomite is earning from the borrowing that's going on is a sustainable flywheel for you guys, obviously. On the proof of liquidity level, though, on the vaults, the vaults specifically. So, I'm probably, this is a dumb question, but so you're going to have to onboard, asset by asset. So, like for example, the action would be, I think one of the first ones you guys are starting with is reservoir, right? Right. So the action on these vaults will be supplying liquidity into reserve USD on proof of liquidity, and then that will earn you BGT rewards
Yeah, I mean
in the
the flow
Dolomite.
would be for someone looking to use it. You can go and get just some RUSD if you want directly from Reservoir, but on Dolomite we make it easy to swap between assets. That's something we didn't even touch on yet, but we have built out this Zap feature that's a meta aggregator. It makes it really easy to swap between assets that we have listed. You don't need to track down a DEX, or a lot of times we'll also integrate directly with protocols for minting or redeeming. So you need to find the right page on the web app. So you could deposit, USDC or Bera if you wanted to Dolomite, and then swap into RUSD. So now you have your RUSD on Dolomite, and then you could take that and then stake it into proof of liquidity right from Dolomite. So now you hold POL RUSD, and now you're earning those rewards. You could go and claim BGT, but then that asset is still usable on Dolomite like you would use other Dolomite assets. So you could take that and put it into one of those borrow positions we talked about earlier, and take out debt and just easily loop it up one click if you want to whatever leverage you feel comfortable with. But yeah, the process overall is quite fast and streamlined, really. For all the complexities that go on with proof of liquidity, it's really just bring in your RUSD. You want to use it in proof of liquidity. Well, one click later, you're now engaged with that.
Yeah, no, yeah. Again, you guys are very UX focused, which is one of the things I like most about Dolomite. Because, I mean, if you read the timeline, right, there's varying sentiments about proof of liquidity. Some people say it's the future of France. Some people say it's clunky and it's unusable. Some people say they have no idea what the fuck it is. You go from various stages, right, of sentiment about proof of liquidity. It's very, very cerebral, right? Like, so it's good to see that I think like teams are thinking at the app level, like how do we simplify people's interactions with proof of liquidity, make it easy to interact with, we'll abstract away maybe some of the complexity, and really the user can just focus on, earning yield, at the end of the day, or entering, into the leverage position you want to enter into,
Which I'd say is
and
the
things like
goal
that.
of a lot of DeFi protocols in general is really it should all be about abstracting away. That's the whole benefit of DeFi. Are these DeFi Legos where it all just builds on top of each other, and you could have these complex mechanisms at a base level, and maybe the really big players might engage directly with it at the complex level, but someone will build a protocol on top of it that simplifies the UI and just gets you down to the core actions you need to do, and someone could build on top of that a nice little wrapper around it all, and you just deposit and earn a bunch of rewards. And it's each one of those layers just makes it more accessible to people. And we certainly try. That's always the battle with our UI or UX, is that we have a lot of features, a lot of things to fit in there. So for some it could be a little overwhelming, so we try and build out things like strategies, but you don't want to strip away the functionality for those power users that really want it. You got to be able to offer this wide range, simple when you can, and then all the details when you want it. And but that's something we're trying to do, at least in terms of the process for proof of liquidity, where it is more of a complex ecosystem, and I would encourage everyone to read up and understand it as best they can. But of course, there are traditional finance, technology in general. There are always like these deeper levels that you can always go to understand any of it. But as long as you could get a high enough level of understanding and you could feel comfortable enough with it, and it's within your risk profile, if the process of getting into it is easy enough, why not?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if you want to know about proof of liquidity, you just listen to this podcast, because I think you've done probably the best job of anybody that I've heard outside of Jack. Like
I
Jack's
was
done
gonna say,
obviously
like,
a
I
phenomenal
was
job.
literally gonna say, go listen to something from Jack, because
Yeah,
Jack is like, he could do far better than I can at explaining it.
yeah, no, it's good. No, it's good to hear, I think a builder's perspective on proof of liquidity, and actually hear about like the way you're thinking about it and the strategy behind it.
And a lot of it is
Um,
also just, we're thinking in terms of the user experience. What's the flow for someone coming in? What are the minimum number of steps they need to do to get into it, and then how do we show them what they earn from it? That should be really the whole thing that's built around. Is this is all you need to do? This is what you get out of it. And here's where you could go for more information if you really want to dive in.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think the thing I like about proof of liquidity, maybe an underrated thing, right, is it kind of creates this like stickiness for liquidity to stick around, in the protocols and in the apps, right? Because if they want to earn the BGT at the end of the day, they're going to park their liquidity there and less incentivized maybe to pull it out. So that's like the most fascinating part for me, right? Is like you think about proof of liquidity, kind of has this like, solidly type mechanism. Obviously, it's more complex and, kind of on steroids. But that's kind of been my favorite part about the model of solidly in general, and kind of, that whole concept is just it really creates stickiness, where you can build your TVL and you can reasonably assume that TVL will probably stick around for quite a while.
I would
So
say, it's that, and also just that it creates a proper alignment of incentives, I suppose. Corey always says this line of, with a lot of other chains, the users farm the protocols and the protocols farm the chain. And really, it's something that could burn out after not too long. In the long run, it just tanks a token price as people just pump out rewards and everyone dumps them. But this one, it works in a very different direction, where the protocols are incentivized to, bribe into the chain, and the chain is built around putting liquidity back into protocols, and it creates this very virtuous cycle where chains thrive because of the ecosystem built upon them, built upon the protocols built upon the chain. And if there's this great ecosystem, it creates benefit for all the users. Everyone gets a better experience out of it. So I think it's that flow that is a lot more advantageous than what you could find elsewhere.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess getting back to our Dolomite story then, right? So like obviously, you guys launch on Berachain. It's been a big success. TVL's gone up. I'm sure revenue's gone up. You guys finally announced that you were having a token, even though you lied to us for years and said there was no token. So
Hey, for a lot of that was very true. Of we didn't even have any
you
plans
didn't,
in place. We were focusing on what we're building. As
it's
true
fine.
then as
Plausible deniability. I get it. That's fine. That's fine. No, it's just funny. Notch from Jones Down. It was always hilarious every time you guys got up on a podcast or something. He would always bother you guys about the Dolomite token.
Yep.
And now finally it's here, right? So, you guys have been very, very experimental, I would say, with tokenomics design, utility, maybe for the tokens, going all the way back to, the OARB, kind of mechanism that you guys decided to go with back with the, I can't remember if it was the STIP or the LTIP or whatever it was called. And so that's kind of translated into the Dolomite tokenomics as well, right? So wondering, take us through Dolomite, the token, right? What's the utility? I know you guys just announced some things last week that are pretty exciting, as well for the Dolomite token. And the last thing before I'll let you talk is it's just been awesome to see, like, you guys kind of reverse engineered the way that you guys have launched your token. A lot of projects are just, hey, come earn points because we're going to have an airdrop, right? And you guys kind of took the opposite approach, where it was like, nope, no token, no token, no token. But it kind of gives you an opportunity to really understand, like, do we have a useful product, or are people just farming us for our token?
Exactly.
And so that's
the wrong incentives, really.
Yeah.
We have a product. We had a product that is something useful. It provides a real service that actually benefits people. It's not something that we wanted just people to be there to farm and run away as soon as the incentives were gone. We wanted to get product market fit. We wanted to take our time to really establish it and build out our features and our assets to the point where we felt it was time to actually launch a token, and we wanted our users there because they were actual users of the product, and were people who actually found utility in it, enjoyed using it. And it made us feel a lot better in our growth, and what we were able to accomplish growing on Arbitrum with really is just providing an actual service and providing opportunity for people. And that's kind of key to how we do a lot of the things. It's taking the time to try and do it right, which look, I mean, there's certainly some benefit to going quick and pumping it out there and blowing it up really quickly, but we're not really hype people. We're builders, and that's the only way we really know how to operate. So yeah, we certainly took our time with the token. It's 2.5 years from the launch of this version of Dolomite that we're actually sticking with, but versus the however many years since 2018, since we started then. So it's been quite a journey. But yeah, in terms of the approach, it was just a matter of taking into account, a lot of what we saw in the space, what we've learned, and also really trying to focus on long-term alignment. Really, that was a lot of the goal with how this was designed, is just how do we make sure everything is going to be as best it can for the long run. So the tokenomics, it comes down to three pieces, really, three tokens. You got DOLO, that's just your liquid token. That's where you could trade and buy and sell and transfer and lend and borrow. But that one by itself isn't doing too much. It's just letting you actually engage with markets. But then the next one is VE Dolo, and that's our VE lock. And that one is for engaging with the DAO. That's how you vote. That's how you engage with governance. It's something where eventually I imagine the DAO will decide to share revenue as well with VE DOLO holders. But right now I'd say we're much more in a growth phase. It's all about really focusing on making sure Dolomite grows and could reach those certain thresholds of revenues and TVL. But in the shorter run, the other thing with it is, I'd say, two factors. One is that it can direct ODOLO emissions, which I'll get to ODOLO in just a second. And the other one that we just announced recently is that it will also give a discount on borrowing. So by holding VE DOLO, you can reduce your borrow rate up to 10%. Not at the moment. We'll have that out very soon, though. But which can make a huge difference for a lot of these strategies. If you have a delta of 3 or 4%, changing that by another percent is huge, and especially when it's amplified over a 7x, 8x leverage strategy. It goes from being just barely profitable to being hugely profitable. And we're really looking to hit those power users. We're really looking to maximize their strategies and their yield. Give a lot of people that reason to hold long term, and you're maximizing your discount with the size of your lock and the time that it's locked up for. To really see the full discount on your borrow rates, you need to have it locked for the full 2 years. So again, set up for long-term alignment. And then ODOLO is our liquidity mining token. This is the one for emitting it to people who are supplying key assets, really. This is also something that the DAO will get to direct to the assets that they think are the best choice for it. We're kicking it off with just a lot of the key ones that are being borrowed, your USDC, ETH, WBTC, those sort of assets. And this is also the key way that DOLO enters circulation. And because of that, we want to be very careful with the approach to it to make sure it's being done in a way that really maximizes that long-term alignment. A lot of projects will just dump their token out there, and you end up in this death spiral where they have to keep pumping out more and more of them, and they're farmed and sold off. But ODOLO, you earn it for supplying. You could claim once a week on Thursdays, and then you go through a 1-week pairing process, 1-to-1 with DOLO. So you need to be a DOLO holder to get the value out of your ODOLO. And then after that, you could purchase discounted VE DOLO. So it's a discount from the market price of DOLO. And that discount is anywhere from like 0.5% up to 50%, where the 2-year lock is the only way to get that 50% discount. Essentially, you buy it and then it's in a 2-year lock. And you could break these locks early. You could break it for a penalty that scales down as there's less time on the lock. But it means that if you're maximizing your value from ODOLO, it means that you're supplying, which is helping the protocol. You're pairing with DOLO, which means you're at least a DOLO holder for the same amount that you're getting from ODOLO. And then you're purchasing discounted VE DOLO, which if you want to maximize it, you're going to hold it for that 2 years, or at least some portion of it before breaking a lock. So everything goes to benefit those who are in it for the long run, that are really going to be a long-term holder of Dolomite, want to participate in that governance and emission of tokens, and maximize how much they can get from strategies. Meanwhile, someone who's just a mercenary capital coming in to farm things and dump the token, yeah, they could get some ODOLO, but they still have to have DOLO to pair it. And then if they're doing the minimum lock time, they're getting only a slight discount. And yeah, they can eke out a few percent gain, but it's really, really built around those long-term holders, and I think it creates the best long-term ecosystem for Dolomite.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. 100% could not agree with everything that you just said. Especially thinking about like the best way to like emit your token, which I think a lot of protocols have learned their lesson. Obviously, a lot of people have learned their lesson from like the sushi days and some of those days. But thinking about like flywheel mechanisms that you can pull levers on to really push the long term value of your token is insanely important. We were talking prior to this call about how like your token is almost like its own product, and then you've got your actual product, right? And I think a lot of teams need to kind of realize that and make sure that they're also focusing on the long term value accrual of token holders. And as much as you can do that, obviously, I think the better off you're going to be. The thing I love the most is that it seems like with the borrow rate rebate, that you guys are rolling out with for VE DOLO holders, kind of seems like that's kind of like a really really good trigger to kind of like start this flywheel where a lot more people will want to get that ODOLO, right, and kind of take advantage of that max lock because they know that they're going to get benefit on the other side, with the borrowing rates. So I love that model. I think Pendle has something similar, like right where like VE Pendle like boosts your can boost the amount of revenue that you earn from LP positions, and it's just like those kinds of like virtuous cycles, like you said, are ones that I think are going to do the best in the long run.
Yeah, agreed. It's really about setting up those flywheels, as you say. It's something where you're incentivized to hold a lot of VE-DOLO, which incentivizes you to use Dolomite as your lending venue, and also gives you a reason to supply there to get more ODOLO, get more VE-DOLO to again maximize your strategies. And yeah, there's definitely some other ones out there. I'm not positive on Pendle's operation. It probably works exactly as you say, but I know there's a couple out there that do something similar that will put out that rebate or that benefit in the form of their token. I'd say the other benefit with Dolomite is that you're getting it in actual assets as well. This isn't something where you need to be fully committed to Dolomite in that way. You get the rebate in the token you're working with, which is a lot more of what people would be looking for who are looking to operate these strategies.
Yeah, no, it's a key differentiator actually. Yeah, and you're right. Like especially in terms of taking out leverage and looping, especially on some of these volatile assets in terms of interest rates, like it really makes a key difference on a profitable loop versus an unprofitable loop if you have an extra percentage or two on your delta, and it just creates that much more juice flowing through the system because people can take out more leverage. The flywheel keeps churning,
Yeah,
obviously.
which then feeds right back into the suppliers. That's the one where we always try kind of talk about these two sides of it, where we build out all these cool strategies, but then it's like, well, don't forget, your people are borrowing to do these strategies. That means anyone supplying is getting great yield. It's something where on Arbitrum we had the all our GM asset integrations, which were all very high yielding, anywhere 20-30% APR, and it was a lot of people were taking advantage of them, and they're borrowing Link, they're borrowing Uni, they're borrowing ETH, WBTC, USDC, and it meant that the rates on all those were going up. So those had complexities about when you entered the market. There was, the GM assets aren't exactly just this straightforward, price go up or yield come out, but you didn't even need to engage with that. You still get these, secondary benefits where all the borrowers are just feeding into it, and it's the same thing for, if they're the VE Dolo users are getting that extra reason to loop, that extra reason to engage with it, should just help incentivize more liquidity onto the platform and benefit everyone else.
Yeah, that's great. We've covered a lot here, so probably a good time to wrap up. But before we do that, any closing thoughts? Anything I've missed? Anything that you're looking forward to on the roadmap that you wanna talk about? Any alpha you want to drop? Stage is yours.
Yeah, we certainly did cover a lot. That's always the thing with Dolomite is like even for how much we cover, it's
There's still so
always
much more.
always more.
Yeah.
We had our town hall just recently. It went on for we had 2 hours of content just to cover our full just to cover everything. And even then, I felt like you could always dive deeper into things. We barely touched on the Zap, and the biggest thing there, lets you loop up in a position, lets you swap your collateral without repaying your debt if you want to adjust rates. Same thing on the borrowing. But in terms of things to look forward to, proof of liquidity right around the corner. The proof of liquidity RUSD, but then also coming up, we got Bera and Honey versions of it. So, a little bit of flavor for everyone. DOLO, again, right around the corner. In fact, people are already earning their DOLO. It started this past Thursday, and we'll have a page out to claim it and do your pairing very, very soon. We also have coming up of course, the unlocks, the 90-day unlocks. So you'll be able to claim your VE DOLO from that. Also, again, very soon, dive into the Dolomite ecosystem. And then a little further out, Botanics launch. That's going to be a fun one to look forward to. And beyond that, just plenty more integrations and features. I mean, another big one that's coming up is the trade page as well, which will you'll utilize Zap for margin pair trading. Just do any asset on Dolomite against any other asset, and I do it with all the tools you would want for margin trading, your charts, your P&L, and easy management of margin positions, and hopefully open Dolomite up to a whole new set of users, not the kind who are looking for a money market lending borrowing, but are really just trying to play the market and find some unique trading opportunities. But from there's still plenty more beyond that. Our stop loss, take profit, and limit orders. There's so much to build.
We're going to have to do another podcast once this trade feature rolls out, because I have a feeling that's going to be a big moment for you guys too. It kind of positions Dolomite almost like everybody talks about these super apps. What's the super app? What's the super app? And it's like you guys have slowly been adding, right? And eventually you get to this point where like Dolomite is almost one of those super apps, right? Where you can access and do anything in crypto just through Dolomite, right? And yeah, it's been awesome to see. So
that would certainly be a goal with it. It's I think it's hard to set out to be a super app, because you can't just be everything all at once. But it's one of those things where, look, maybe one day we have a version of Dolomite where it's just almost the default of how you engage with DeFi, where why would you hold it in your wallet when you could put it on Dolomite and earn yield? Like, okay, you want to go engage with whatever mechanism like proof of liquidity, vesting, staking, you could do it right on Dolomite, and then you could also borrow against it. You want to trade, you could do it right there. We're plugged into all the dexes. You want to borrow, we have great liquidity. We'd love to be able to make that all available on Dolomite. Oh, and then that also reminds me, is the other one to look forward to in the near to medium term is our smart debt and smart collateral. We'll start being able to compete with Fluid and help you earn a little bit of trading fees on your collateral and your debt, and basically pay down debt.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, that's a big one too, man. Like I said, we really are going to have to do a second version of this. But that was one of the questions I forgot to ask you as well, was kind of how you think Dolomite. I view Fluid and Dolomite as kind of like these next gen, money markets, kind of blending together, the trading experience with the lending and borrowing experience. So it's interesting that you brought that up, because I think that adds on like another level, right, of capital efficiency that, again, I say this a lot, and I've been proven wrong all these years, but I think, like, I'm thinking about Aave, and I'm just like, man, Aave's eventually got to like really innovate, on these things, or these next generation models, if done well, if executed well by smart teams, right, are really going to start eating their lunch a little bit. That's my opinion. Obviously, Aave's huge. I use Aave, so there's a lot there, but
we'd love to see it. But
right.
I mean, there's a lot of innovation happening. The Fluid team is great, and their product is just beautiful. So, we'll see what we can do on our end to give it to do some Dolomite approach to similar tech. But it's that should also hopefully open up a whole new angle for liquidity providing, and turning Dolomite into this venue for liquidity that lets us engage with some larger parties. But there's a lot to talk about.
A lot coming on that roadmap. Well, if you're listening to this, I think we've done a pretty good job. Adam has done a fantastic job of taking us through Dolomite, taking us through most of the features, although there's a war chest of features coming out, it sounds like. So really, really appreciate your time, Adam. Anybody else that's listening to this episode, obviously check out our show notes. We'll have links to where you can go find Dolomite, Adam, Corey, the rest of the team, and what they're building. And we will see you on the next edition of Proof of Vision. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Appreciate you having me on. It's fantastic.
Yep.